Hi, so are you okay being videotaped?
Yes.
Awesome. Could you tell me a little bit about the culture of People's Park and the importance of maintaining that culture?
That's a good question. And the culture of People's Park is something that you're not really going to find written down, but I learned by participating in events there. So I was a musician and often asked to play there. And when I started to play there, I started a garden there too, because I thought, whoa, I wanted to do that. So one of the things I learned was that you can bring things to the park, but it's really frowned upon to take things away from the park, leaves, sticks, like that. The understanding was, and this is nothing but an understanding, you leave it there for the next person to enjoy. So I began kind of listening in to people who had been there a while, and there was more to it. You would never make money off anything associated with People's Park. So there was always, every anniversary, this probably still goes on, there's a tug of war between people who will create a design for that anniversary. And then they would want to sell the t-shirts, and they would claim, some of them would be correct, that all the money would be going back into People's Park, into the park council. The understanding was you don't try to make money off People's Park. And I thought that was interesting, because there's even been a little book, Terry Compost did mostly a picture book about People's Park. She did not make any money off the park. Everything goes into reprinting the book itself, or efforts to make sure the park still has a very inadequate website.
Okay. Like many. Yeah. Questions. Could you tell me a little bit about the role of music in the culture and community of the park throughout history and now?
Music and
even?
food. Yeah, so one of the ways to gather people together is have music and have food. The boring speeches can be filtered into that, of course, but it's really the music and the food that bring people together, at which point you can discover whether or not you have anything in common with them, and you do. So that has been, for years and years and years, people who don't really get a whole lot out of music would argue we shouldn't be so focused on having a big concert because we need to talk more. And the thing is, we tried a few of those anniversaries, and they really did not attract a lot of people, because people love, if people don't love to dance, they love to watch people who love to dance.
Yeah.
And also really feel a rhythm inside them, whether they understand the words or not. There's something much bigger that goes on with people who've shared like a sweaty hot round of crazy dancing. And we used to have always a spiral dance. There'd always be the naked contingent. They're dancing over there. And just people would have their own ways. Often the anniversaries, as a matter of fact, for all of the anniversaries I've ever been to, there have been tribal singers and drummers that begin the dancing with the understanding that this was once tribal land. And it's a nice way to lay the groundwork for other opportunities to appreciate that there's cultural collision and you can't avoid it. That is another thing that music does. That is music. The drums are music. The chanting is music. And the shared chanting is music.
So I just wanted to ask, what has the community been doing to try to stop or slow down these construction plans?
You mean park supporters?
Community park supporters, yes.
Park supporters. I'm trying to be really specific because, of course, our mayor, Jesse Ottagine, when he was running for mayor in 2016, said, of course, it would be inappropriate to build on People's Park. It's crucial that people remember that, because boy, did he flip. And now he says he has no objection. Before People's Park was even called People's Park, they were trying to destroy it because it's a culture they can't control. So I consider it just part of a good example of the larger cultural genocide that I think it's important for, especially white people like me, to just acknowledge is so threaded into the fabric of our lives that it's almost something you take for granted and don't notice and don't care about. So when I say community, park supporters are not a big group. They're not a popular group. They don't have political clout. All they are is right. They're right about park history. The people who are knowledgeable about park history will point these things out, that the University of California has never been benign about People's Park. It has never apologized for even the people who have died to defend People's Park. It's never apologized to me for suing me for $250,000. Don't think they won't try it again. You know, if you can take an unknown folk singer and argue that she's a threat to public safety, what can't you do? They spent way more money than that on this lawsuit against not just me, but 4 other people, and then 40 Jane and John Does. But the idea was to frighten people from speaking up for the park, and they've sure done that. People are terrified. Politicians are terrified to do it. One of the most important things for us to do that we are doing is human being by human being, little group by little group, and op-ed piece by op-ed piece, if we can get something in, is educate people that only 3 blocks away, there's 10 acres of Smith Fernwild already dedicated to being UC housing, no views to obstruct, and in bad need of reconstruction anyway. It doesn't make sense since they already own the land and it's only going to go up in value. It's the hills, after all, that they would get rid of those 10 acres. And then right across the street, 130 acres of Clark Kerr. It's a facade to test the community's willingness to speak up for People's Park. As soon as that's gone, they'll build anything there just so it's no longer People's Park. And then they'll go in, it's just like, I don't know if you've been to downtown Berkeley, but about every 5 to 7 years, they redo the BART Plaza. This time they've spent $7.2 million on redoing the BART Plaza. 7 years from now, they'll want to do something else. Because it's one of the funny things that I do in the Pepper Spray Times is just document each and every iteration of the new, improved BART Plaza. And People's Park is the same way. They come in and they yank out a tree and see how many people protest. You know, they'll lay some concrete and put in a sports court, see how many people protest. And each and every time, they've had to either address their own idiocy, and apparently they're going to take out their own basketball court, which was the one thing they left because we actually thought basketball was cool. Not the concrete, but it started off being sort of a pounded sand court of some kind. It was some kind of half-assed compromise, but it just makes me laugh that this is all a game to test community will and the strength of that landmark, which is only a city landmark. There's no strength to that, really. They knock down city landmarks all the time. But before its 50th anniversary, which is coming up next year, they don't want it to get national recognition, and it well could.
But how has the university specifically silenced members of the park and the community and park supporters in the past? So could you speak to like the 60s, 70s first, and then?
By shooting them. Ask the family of James Rector, who I think bled for 3 days and then died of a splay of gunshot to his middle. Alan Blanchard was blinded. The political career of Ronald Reagan was made behind deciding that UC students were a bunch of spoiled brats and really needed to be pounded on and called in the National Guard, and never looked back. No apology there. So that didn't just punish UC students, it was an entire community of workers, businesses. The disruption to Southside every time they do this costs millions of dollars. And apparently they don't care. You know, they are marching toward this as if that had never happened in the 60s. And then it happened again in the 70s. And it happened again in the 90s. And in the 80s, what Lonnie Hancock, what she began to do was decide that homeless people should not be allowed to rest or sleep there. And they had been sleeping there at night. It was a place where there was food services would come. People who wanted to donate food or share food would go there, and people would spend the night there. And so she just drove up with or not her personally, but under her administration, they drove up with a trash compactor and just threw people's belongings in a trash compactor. Everything. So there was a successful lawsuit. Not everyone was in that lawsuit because a lot of people, they just flee in terror. But the people who stayed and fought are are have names, went on the record, talked about losing Bibles, losing family jewelry, losing what little they had as people with very little to their names, and won their lawsuit. Lonnie Hancock, who is now a state representative, did that and has never apologized. So I mention those things because our politicians are playing the same game that the University of California did. Who's going to object? How are they going to object? Will it hurt me? Will it hurt me legally, politically? They're all playing that game. And it makes me really sad because the park really is just kind of a scruffy little piece of ground. And people, I'm often thinking that anybody who came here as a student and said, People's Park, I want to go see it, would stand there and go, what? Is that all there is? Because without its history, without the stories that they try to stop us from telling, without any effort to be accurate on the city website, on the University of California website, and there's no effort to be accurate.
Yeah.
No, but it's not really much I can say. They do know how to silence people.
Yeah,
if I had been a student, you better believe there would have been other repercussions.
Yeah.
No, you can't just stop someone's education because of what they said or what they wrote.
What are some key elements to the essence of the culture of Berkeley in your eyes?
Well, up until the last few years, my answer would have been very different. I was walking up here now, kind of lamenting the flip that Jesse Adeguin did. This was a really big flip. He spent 2 years running saying that he would work with the homeless advocacy groups that I've worked with all over town. As soon as he was technically the mayor, he took our report, which asked him to do, oh man, we had like 15 bullet point things that he had agreed to do. He just gave himself an A and retired the document. He did that himself without consulting with any of us. And I think I'm the only person in town who wrote about it in one op-ed piece and also in the Peppersbury Times. I really feel like hypocrisy is the thing that I'm looking at now in the city of Berkeley, where what we do is embrace ourselves for using words like diversity, for caring that at least one Black person be in the room when we convene to discuss an issue. Only one, thank you.
Yeah.
But watching us dwindle from about 12% Black population to, I think it's half that, maybe 6% now. And not really taking the obvious steps we need to take. And by obvious steps, I mean housing and addressing our own racism. Because I have to say, there's been enough attacks on synagogues here in Berkeley. We had the Nazis come here and get an embrace from the Republican club on campus under the guise of free speech, which is kind of silly when you think about it, because I don't really think that racists feel they can't talk, but that's the claim. If there was anything I wish we could meditate a week about, it is our obvious hypocrisy as a town when we're watching our diversity just dwindle away. And I think that on campus, the struggle is very real for students of color here, and that I'm not sure how safe they feel talking about it. I hope they do. When I remember being a student here, I just remember it was neck and neck keeping up with the reading and the writing. Constantly new assignments, and I used to dig right into them and try so hard. It took everything I had to get good grades, and I did, but it was not a walk. I didn't have time for a lot of extracurricular nothing. And so I really feel for the students here. If anybody's expecting them to change this world, I just go like, whoa.
Wow.
I hope you know the workload these young people are under, because it was not too much for me, but it would have been too much for me to know a whole lot about my city government. Forget it. Even who represented me. I think I voted, but probably imperfectly. I have to say, I think about the expectations of the students here and what they're paying just to be here in comparison to me, who got here just after it stopped being free. $30, I think. University of California education used to be free, should be free. We need to return to those days. And what it's going to take is an energized electorate. I think we have it now. I really want the students here to have a sense of being grateful for the education they get. And that's kind of the culture I came from, where it's a wondrous, wondrous thing just to learn to read. It's an even more wondrous thing to be guided by people who really have a powerful understanding about a whole field.
Oh, yeah.
And my father used to really try to impress upon me, take advantage of that moment. You know, you may never have it again, and that it's something really special. I want this place to return to what it once was, which was this really amazing resource for the interested population of young people and older people who really wanted exactly that. They wanted to explore, wanted to read things they'd never read before, and find out more about who they could be before they had to commit to something, you know. So